Hey everybody, it's Kevin from 3D Printed Props, and in today's video we are going to be working on this mask and dagger from the movie Freaky. So if you're a subscriber and someone who watches the channel, you know that I love horror movies. I love working on horror props, you know, from the Michael Myers cosplay to the Annabelle doll I did, and I've got some really cool horror stuff coming. But I love horror movies, and that's all kinds. It's comedy horror, you know, silly stuff, suspenseful stuff, real hardcore horror stuff. And this movie, Freaky, is one of my sort of new favorites. So that's why I decided I wanted to not only have this mask in my shop, so if you go to 3dprintedprops.com, you can pick up the files to this mask and dagger, the Dola, but I definitely wanted to do this for the channel and do put a little cosplay together since it was pretty simple. All I needed was a black t-shirt, a gray long sleeve shirt, and a pair of black jeans. So that was it, including these two guys, and I was off to the races. Now this is a really fun print, and it's easy to print, so is the dagger, and it was really fun to paint. So in this video I'm going to be showing you some dry brush techniques and some different techniques to make foam look like leather. It was a really fun build. I really enjoyed it. Let's go ahead behind the fake wall and get busy. Okay, so let's start work on the blade itself. Now I printed this off on a resin printer, and I believe it was on my Phenon L, which is a printer I love to use, and you can see very little work we're going to have to do with this. Printed out the eyes in red. It is super sharp. That's why I love a resin printer. You don't have to do a lot of work in cleaning it up, but we are going to do a little sanding because we're also going to add some lights. So I'm trying to figure out where I want to put the button, where my thumb would hit it. I guess I'll figure that out later. We're going to use this tiny switch so you won't be able to see it too much, a little battery, and a small LED. Now we're going to use some of this epoxy sculpt, and I love this stuff. You mix 1-to-1 and it hardens up. What happened is I printed the eyes a little too small. If you get the file from me, and you can get it from me over at 3dprintedprops.com, print the eyes out a little bit bigger, and then you can just glue them in the space. Now, I could have reprinted them, but I really wanted to fool around with this epoxy sculpt and do some sort of like, some clay work, some really working it in to make it look natural. Because the dagger itself is, I'm assuming, the real one, carved out of bone, quote unquote real one. So I work on it with a little bit of water and these clay tools to really sort of smooth it out in certain areas to make it look a lot more natural. And when it doesn't work, go ahead and work it with your fingers. Now this stuff really responds well to water, and it softens it up, and you can really get a lot smoother. And there it is. I think it looks pretty sharp, and it follows this, the line and the natural look that the blade has itself. Now I'm going to put the actual switch right here. I'm going to use a Dremel, and as it would turn out, and of course mask, don't forget a mask, as it was turn out, this was not a good place to put the switch because the blade itself has to fit in, and then there's just, wiring, so it's a little bit too close to the end. If you're going to do this and put a switch in, you should put it a little bit farther up the line, the hole, so you can do it. Now, that is a gigantic bulb. It is way too big. I'm going to try to use that and then realize it doesn't work. It's too big, so I go with a smaller one. So I go ahead and just sort of place the switch in, and again, it's too low, but I wasn't going to redo it because I actually find that out in a few minutes, but it's okay. Mistakes happen when you're doing a project. You roll with it and you do the best you can. A little bit more epoxy sculpt to hold that little switch in place. Now I'm going to hit everything with a clear primer. Why a clear primer? It's what I had, so I went ahead and used it. Now we're going to work on the blade using a little bit of black and a little bit of blue mixed up because it's supposed to be, it's not stone, it's supposed to be a metal, and it had like a bluish tint. You can see, I think it looks pretty cool. It's got that little bit of blue to it. But when I dry it up with a hairdryer, the blue kind of goes away. So I just sort of dry brush with a more of the blue tone than the black to try to get that to come out a little bit more. It's a little hard because it's really subtle when you're looking at it on camera. But then I go ahead and I realize when it dries up, it's going to be 10 times darker. So I hit it with some almost straight blue. And once that dries up, you can see it has that neat look. And now we're going to use this Metal Effects Rust paint. I love using this stuff, and I never get to, but I figured why not. So I hit it with the primer that it comes with. Mostly because, this is specialty paint. It might need its own primer. I don't use it a lot, so I'm not 100% sure. But the cool thing is the primer matches the color of rust, so it's a nice little filler. Now, this paint I use once every like year and a half, and I think it's gone bad because it's all sort of like thick and pasty, and I remember it being much, smoother to go on. And hopefully it will work. It did, but I had to give it a lot more coats of the rust activator for it to work. So now what you do is you just spray this rust activator on, and it reacts with the metal in the paint and actually creates real rust. It isn't, paint on rust effects. It is real rust. And I just, why not? Why not play around with it? Look at that. That looks great. Could I paint it to look like that? Maybe. Would it take me a lot longer? Yes. So I went ahead and used this rust stuff, and I love it. Now we're going to go ahead and paint this bone. And if you look at some references, it's got a yellowish tint to it. So we're going to use this unbleached ivory that I love, some burnt sienna, some browns, and just a straight yellow ochre to get this sort of, it's an definitely off-white, because it does have that sort of dirty aged bone look. And I'm just going to go ahead and paint the entire thing and get this look to it. Now, it actually needs a second coat. You can see the gray is coming through, so I do give it a second coat. Now, I mix up that same color as a base that I used for the main body of it, and I mix in some more, yellow ochre and some brown ochre to really darken it up, because in between the teeth and in between all the cracks and crevices, you got this darker color. So I play around with it, and it looks a little bit messy. I clean it up here and there, but for the most part, I do kind of leave it like this because it's wear, it's dirt, it's grime, and it's going to have that look to it. This is a old Dagger, and I want it to look that way. So now I'm just going to go ahead and go through all of the cracks and crevices and add this sort of, dirty sort of detail. If you get it in areas you don't want it, just go ahead and, wipe it away with your finger. This is just acrylic paint. Going back, I probably should have maybe watered it down a little bit more and went multiple coats. But in the end, I'm really happy with it because, again, if you look at the references, it's a paint. It's a grimy, aged piece of bone, and I really think this really helps it. And go in with any tool you need, your finger, some paper towels to sort of lighten up certain areas, wipe certain areas away where would happen. It dingied it up a little bit too much, so I went ahead and mixed up the same base with a little bit of white to just hit the edges a little bit. Now, yes, I went into the cracks. I went back over that, and I really think that helps sort of bring that whiteness back to where, when your hand's touching it, it would maybe wear it clean. So I liked adding that little bit of white to it, and it gave it a lot more dimension. And I went ahead and just add that everywhere. When you put it up on the top head of the head here, you can really see how it brings out some of the texture that's in the file, and it really makes it look more natural and more like bone. But I noticed that the eyes, I used a red resin, the eyes are really, really red. So I went through with a black wash, which is just a really translucent, ink type paint, and I went over the eyes to blacken them up a bit, and it really helped knock that cartoony red back. So here's the switch. It's just a simple, switch with the battery put in and then the lights, and I'm just going to go ahead and shove all that stuff in there, and then when I hit the switch, you can see how it lights up, and I was really, really happy with that. Now, the file does come with modeled rope, modeled string, but I figured, I've got a bunch of this string, I might as well use it. I just put down some super glue, and now I'm just going to tightly wind this twine around here without getting my finger stuck to the model, which happened all the time in this process. But I think this is going to really help make it look even more real. That rust and then this twine I think it gives it a really, really good look. And it's just a little bit of super glue and the twine. Again, links for everything will be below. Then I'm going to age this with a yellow sort of brown wash, because it would look really silly if everything else was aged and worn, but you had this brand new twine on here. Now, links for everything I used will be in the description below, but I think in the end, this really pulls it together and gives it that realistic look, especially with this awesome rust. It just really ties everything together and makes it really stand out. Now let's work on the mask. Now, mask is going to be a pretty simple paint job. We're going to use this some black. We're going to use some different browns, some of that great unbleached titanium white that I love. And we're going to start off really, really dark, because if you look at the mask, if you look at references, it's a dark mask. It's a dark brown mask, and that's what I'm shooting for with this. So I just go ahead and it's pretty easy. I'm just flooding this thing with paint, not going crazy, because you don't want to, get rid of all the detail, and there is a lot of texture and a lot of detail. So I'm applying enough paint to cover all that stuff up, but not so much as to lose the detail. And, getting the cracks and crevices. I dry it with a hair dryer, and it is very dark. And you're thinking, oh, I'm losing a lot of that detail. And here I am adding more black, because if you look at the reference, there are some areas that have a really sort of a darker black to them. So I'm just hitting those places with that black color. Now, the good thing is, once we start doing some dry brushing of some lighter tones, that texture at the top level is going to get picked up, and it is just going to pop and stand out, and you're going to see all the beautiful texture that is in this mask. But before I do that, I'm adding even more dark. You say, you're going crazy. I'm not. So this is almost straight black acrylic paint. It might be a little bit of water washing it down, and I'm really just filling in these cracks, because these are, in the reference, super dark. They're pretty much black, and I wanted to make sure that they were like that here. I can always lighten them up later if I don't like how black they are, but I think they're pretty cool. So now we're going to start doing a dry brush, and I use this sort of thick bristled flat brush for that, and I'm using some of the titanium white, some of the browns, some of the sort of brown ochres, and these different sort of natural colors. I'm getting a lot of the paint off, and now I'm just going to skate the brush so it's just on the top layer. It's just hitting those highlights, it's painting those, and it's not going so deep that it's actually getting and covering up all that dark color we have underneath. Sometimes I add a little bit too much paint, and I just maybe wipe it away with a towel. You can do that. Like right here, it's too much. So I actually will go back and sort of wipe some of that away so it doesn't show up too much. But then I looked at it and I thought, you know what? I'm going to keep it. I can always knock it back if I need to. I realized maybe I was making the mask a little bit too dark, and I sort of went with it and kept that tone going, especially after I dried it and I noticed it darkened up, pretty severely. But most of the time you want to keep your brush pretty dry when you're doing this technique, because if you don't, you're going to cover up the dark brown underneath. Like, look at this eye area where I'm painting. You can see how I am just skating over the top, and just that little bit is turning brown, but all that nice black tone is staying underneath. And that's how you build up the texture. It's how you build up the different layers of the paint to really give it that natural effect. Because I'm assuming this is some type of leather mask over maybe, I don't know, some type of, wood maybe, I don't know, that really over time has cracked and has aged and shown all the imperfections in it. I thought this was a really cool mask. He doesn't keep it for the whole movie, obviously. Now, obviously, if you've never seen it, you don't know that. But he doesn't wear it the whole movie. He wears it in this great intro that introduces him, Vince Vaughn, as the Blissfield Butcher. But it's pretty cool. So now I'm just going a little bit lighter, and I'm just skating over again, hitting some of the highlight areas. Usually your higher areas, you're going to get your highlights, the bridge of the nose, the higher parts in here. But you can see it's still keeping a lot of that lighter brown. So you're going from a dark to a more lighter color, a little more of a highlight, and then you hit it with that last highlight to really make stuff like the bridge of the nose pop, around the eyes, the teeth, things like that. Now, one of the things in the mask it shows is sort of like almost like a rusty sort of red color here. So this is, again, just some paint mixed up, an orange, a brown, and a little bit of water to give this area here that sort of rusty look that is in the references that I found. And if you put on too much like I did there, just wipe it off with your finger. It's okay. It's a cosplay mask, and you're working on it yourself. And if it's got a few mistakes on it, that is okay. But I'm pretty happy with how that turned out, and I'm just going to go ahead and add it to a few other places on the mask. Again, if you add too much paint, dab it away, and everything will be fine. Now, looking at the reference, I just went ahead and added it to some of the other parts that the reference had. It didn't have it so much on the teeth, but I like the idea of adding actually a little bit into the teeth to sort of spread that look out. And here it is. You can see how building up the layers, that dark to start, and then going up to the little bit of lighter color, and then hitting it with that final highlight, and just adding the depth of those really black cracks, it really works out. Now, to keep this from chipping or whatnot, we're going to go ahead and add this clear coat, and I like this Dead Flat by Rust-Oleum because, this isn't a shiny helmet. Now we're going to work on the straps, some nylon straps, some of these little clips, and we're actually going to make the leather straps with this foam, and this is a 2mm foam. Now, the first thing we have to do is seal the foam. There's a couple different ways, but I have some Mod Podge laying around, so I went ahead and filled this out. Now, I found a really good reference. Actually, what I did was I went to, I think I went to YouTube, and I found this clip, and then I paused it and was able to get a screen grab and to see what this leather looked like. And you can see that it's this aged thick leather strip. So first thing I'm going to do is I sort of guesstimated how thick the strips looked from the reference, and then I went through and gave them all just like a straight brown and painted all the way through, and I did all the strips, and then I'm going to go ahead through and add a lot more texture later. Now, one of the things I wanted to do was give these leather straps texture. So I found these cool files from Henry 3D Creations on Etsy. He does incredible work. Printed them out, took a day, and I'm going to heat up the foam using just a hairdryer and roll these leather textures over, and you can see how it just pushes into the leather. You can see the difference here where it's just straight, flat, and then this one has got this cool leather look. Now we're going to go ahead and use these two colors here, burnt sienna and raw sienna, and some brown, a sponge, because you want this natural look, and we're going to create the leather look. And how we're going to do that is we're just going to build up little blotches of paint, these different brown and yellow brown tones to give that natural leather look. And you can sort of see right here that it's already starting. That base layer with those layers on top of it really start to create something that looks like leather. Now, this is going to take a while. We've got like 3 strips to do, and it's pretty tedious, and you can overwork it, but just have fun with it, and you can't ruin it. Just go over it with a darker color if you need to, or go over it with a lighter color if you need to, but you're not going to make a mistake because you're looking to get a natural look. The only way you could get a mistake is if you made them all very uniform. That's why you use the sponge. So now we're going to cut up some of this nylon to make the strap, and you can see that we have one of the straps, the leather, and they need to bend over like into the reference, and then they're going to connect to the nylon straps. Now I went ahead and just put this nylon brace in here that I put together. It's just 3 pieces of nylon and then that strap. So I bent this over, and I went ahead and of course painted this before I did this. I saw where I was going to put the rivet and sort of place that in the center, give it a little bit of a push, and then broke out the glue gun, which I am it looks like a massacre, but it's aged. We're aging things, so it'll look okay in the end. But there is a lot, way too much glue. So I'm just going to sort of push that into place and then sort of fix it later.
Now I'm going to go in with just a little screwdriver, and I'm going to punch the holes. So these are the holes that you would use if this was a real strap and that was like a real clasp. I'm just going to put a bunch of holes in this thing to make it look like it is really a piece of leather that you would, connect via the straps. I'm pretty happy with that. And that's just a little screwdriver. That's all you need. You don't need to get any fancy tools. Then I'm going to use some of this cement. You can use barge cement. You can use this kind of cement. The thing with rubber cement, this type of rubber cement, is it needs to have two things need to be coated, and then it needs to be dry. So I'm going to put it down the center of this. And when you touch these things together, once they are dry, they stay together or they tear. So I do make a little bit of a mistake, but I'm lucky enough I didn't push down at all, and I was able to just get it up. It actually did tear the foam a little bit in the inside. And I'm just sort of putting this over the top of that nylon strapping so it looks like that is the thing holding on, whereas the foam wouldn't. These straps will. Now I just put them on all like that, the top one, the bottom one. You can see how they just go right down the middle and they're on that strap. Now, how am I going to get this on? I'm going to connect this with Velcro so I could take it apart and just undo that snap. Now, the funny thing is, once I finish it, I find that I don't even need to take it apart. So I go ahead and glue it. It just fits. I don't need to unsnap it. So, but you could just simply use that. Now we're going to age it, and where the holes are, there'd be some wear and tear. So I'm just going over it with some blacks and some browns and hitting different areas on the strap just to grime it up a bit. This is a dirty thing here. Where would dirt end up? In the cracks and crevices, of course. So we're going to hit something in here just to age that up. Now, I showed it to my wife and she said it looked great, but it didn't have any scuffing to it. It looked too cut, too new. Which it did, right? It's just foam. It's cut with a razor blade. So I went in with a really aggressive rasp and just ate it up with this thing. And then went over it a little bit more with some browns to cover up some of the black that I created. But, doing this really just totally made it look perfect. So let's go ahead and take a look at everything all put together. This is my Blissfield Butcher cosplay.
So a lot of different techniques in this project, the dry brushing to create this leathery, weird look, the leather effects, the rust, the bone color. This was really fun because I got to do a bunch of different things. The 3D printing is fun, setting up a file, watching it print, bzz, 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 but it's pretty boring. It isn't until this part where I get to paint things and make them look real that I really love it. And if you love this video, what a segue. Please click like and subscribe, hit that little bell, and it'll let you know when the next video is up. So you guys have a great day or night, whatever it may be, and I will see you in the next one. Take it easy.